Welcome to Braintalk, a podcast brought to you by the Center for Early Detection, Assessment, and Response to Risk, located at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center.
Conversations that explore the brain and innovative therapies to help young people at risk.
Hey everyone, I'm Diana.
And I'm Eddie.
On this episode of Brain Talk, we have with us Dr. Michelle Friedman-Yakoobian. She is a licensed clinical psychologist at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center Public Psychiatry Division of the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, an instructor in psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and the clinical director of the Center for Early Detection, Assessment, and Response to Risk.
Currently, she is developing and studying a new treatment for young people at clinical high risk for psychosis, called CLUES, Cognition for Learning and Understanding Everyday Social Situations. She has also written many journal articles and often presents at colleges, hospitals, and community agencies to raise awareness of early signs of psychosis and to emphasize the importance of early intervention. On the last episode of Brain Talk, we learned about cognitive remediation with Dr. Keshvan. Today's episode, we will focus on the relationship between stress and the risk for mental illnesses.
Thank you for coming in today, Dr. Friedman-Yakoobian. Let's begin by talking about stress. How would you define stress?
How would I define stress? Well, I think stress is a pretty normal part of life. There really is no such thing as a life without stress. I think stress motivates us to do things. Without stress, we wouldn't be motivated to get up in the morning or go to school or come to work. But there is such thing as probably too much stress. And everybody has a different way of responding to stress when we're feeling too much or kind of not having enough. Even boredom can be a stressor.
I agree that having stress is quite a normal experience, but I was just wondering how stress would affect me, because as a college student, people always say it's a very stressful time, and I wasn't really sure how stress would personally affect me, physically and or mentally.
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, I think college is certainly a time where you experience a lot of stress, and everybody experiences stress in different ways. So in thinking about how stress affects you, are there certain things that you notice when you're feeling stressed that kind of change?
Yeah, for me, it's usually I have difficulty focusing at times, or tasks become a bit harder for me when I'm stressed.
Definitely. I think a lot of us feel that way for sure.
Yeah. On this podcast, we like to discuss things that are relevant for young adults and provide information that might be useful. And so I wanted to ask you what the relationship between stress and the risk for mental illness was.
That is a great question. Well, as we talked about, stress is a normal part of life. It's something everybody experiences, and we all have different bodies and brains that respond to stress in different ways. And we know that stress does have a way of interacting with risk for mental illness. You mentioned earlier that you're in college, and that's a really exciting time of life. There's lots of really wonderful things happening. You're learning, you're developing new relationships, having new roles in life, and at the same time, there's stress, there's tests, there's relationship struggles, there's, figuring out your schedule, there's all kinds of pressures that college students experience, thinking about using drugs and alcohol, and thinking about how to manage time. And all of those things can have an interaction with stress. And for some people who are vulnerable or have kind of a likelihood of getting certain kinds of difficulties, stress can actually be a trigger for developing symptoms of mental illness. Some people under stress will have trouble thinking or may start to feel very overwhelmed or sad or feel like avoiding things that they might feel important to them but just feel like too much, so might isolate and spend a lot of time at home. Some people who are experiencing a lot of stress may try to cover up that stress by using drugs or alcohol and trying to party a lot or playing video games 10 hours a day. People have different ways of responding to stress, and some people that we see a lot in our clinic may experience stress and their brains may react in a way where their brain starts to play tricks on them. So they may find that they're hearing noises or voices that they know aren't real, but keep coming back to them, or they might start worrying about something that they're not sure makes sense. Like they might worry that maybe somebody can sort of know what they're thinking, or something like that. And that's another way that the brain can respond to stress.
Okay. So, you were saying about at this clinic you dealt with people who felt that people's minds are playing tricks on them and they're uncertain of new situations. And I was kind of wondering, what kind of population is that? Who are these people that are normally affected by stress in this matter?
Well, I think specifically those kinds of difficulties, mind playing tricks, are people that may be showing signs of risk for a certain kind of a medical or symptom called psychosis. A lot of people sometimes have heard that word, psychosis, before, and they might think that it means something like, I don't know, what are some media things that you guys have heard about psychosis that may come to mind? What are some of the kind of common...
That people are violent or crazy or sorts of negative connotations that can come with the stigma surrounding.
Yeah, sometimes people use that word to mean something like just out of control or something like that. That's not accurate. Really what psychosis means is it's really just a medical symptom or a medical condition that can make it hard to tell what's real from what's not real. And so in some of the examples I gave where, like someone, if your mind is playing tricks on you and you may hear a voice or a noise, it sort of feels like it's real, that could be an example of psychosis. But a really important thing is that's a treatable condition, and for someone who's, just like some people are vulnerable to having a lot of trouble sleeping when they're under stress or not being able to think as quickly as they used to. Some people may get vulnerable to having certain kinds of symptoms, and knowing that treatments are available is a really important, I think what I understand is one of the important reasons that you guys are having this podcast.
Exactly. So I wasn't sure. So does stress and psychosis have a direct relationship? So with someone who's stressed, is anyone likely to form psychosis, or who forms or develops psychosis?
That is a great question. So there actually is, there's a lot of research being done to better understand what causes psychosis, and we do know that there does seem to be a relationship between stress and psychosis. And it isn't the case that everyone is going to, anytime someone experiences stress, they're going to develop psychosis. It does seem like someone who has a vulnerability for that is more likely to develop those kinds of symptoms. However, under the right amount of stress, it is possible for almost anyone in the world to experience psychosis, meaning trouble telling what's real from what's not. So, for example, they've done studies where if somebody was in a sensory deprivation chamber for a long period of time, or if someone is forced to go without sleep for many days in a row, some people who otherwise have never shown any risk for trouble with telling what's real from what's not may develop those symptoms. But some people may develop those symptoms under, more everyday kinds of stress, like a breakup with a girlfriend or boyfriend, or, in the context of being in a really hard class where you are feeling very worried and spending a lot of hours trying to study and keep up. Or some people may experience the stress of moving to college or starting a new school and start to experience their mind playing tricks on them in the context of that.
In these cases of high stress, what are some strategies for stress reduction?
I think that's a great question. I think one of the most important things that a person who is experiencing stress or who's experiencing changes in their thinking, that they worry might be psychosis, is to know that these are really common experiences, that you're not alone. I think one of the things that can make stress really grow is shame. When somebody feels like the kind of experiences they have are not normal, or that they're weird, or that they shouldn't have them and they need to make them go away, that can actually make stress grow, because it can make someone feel very lonely and feel very overwhelmed. And it turns out that there actually are a lot of ways to get support when someone's experiencing stress, and if somebody is feeling like their mind is playing tricks on them, it's actually a whole lot more common for that experience to happen than people often realize. Studies have found that 3 in 100 people will experience psychosis. So if you're at, how many people go to your college, for example?
17,000, I think.
17,000, okay. So,
Yeah.
It's late in the day and I'm not sure I can do the math, but 3 out of 100 of those people is quite a few hundred people.
It is,
Yeah.
wow.
That may be experiencing some of these symptoms. And then we also, in the clinic that I work in, the Cedar Clinic, we work with people that are maybe experiencing signs that they might be developing psychosis or they might be at risk, but they haven't actually lost that ability to tell what's real from what's not. So I see a lot of young people that are experiencing a thought that keeps coming back, like they might worry that maybe their friends know what they're thinking, or that someone's trying to send a message to them, like someone on TV or something like that. But at the same time, they're kind of thinking, I know that doesn't make sense. I keep worrying about this. I keep thinking this is happening, but I know it's not real. And we would call that kind of almost like a milder version, or it's sort of your mind playing tricks on you, but it's not really psychosis, because a person still is able to tell what's real from what's not real. And there's the rates of people that have those symptoms is even higher. So where 3 out of 100 people would experience psychosis, somewhere around anywhere, up till, some studies have found up till about 14% of young adults will experience trouble telling what's real from what's not real at some point in their life.
So you say that people have difficulty telling what's real and what's not real. So I just was wondering if you had any practical examples of that.
Sure. Really common example, we see a lot of young adults that are feeling like their ears are playing tricks on them. So they might hear kind of whispers or noises, and when they look around, they don't actually see anyone, making those sounds. They're kind of realizing that maybe those sounds are kind of coming from inside their mind. Our ears are what we think we hear with, but we actually hear with our brain. And so sometimes our brain can kind of trick us into thinking that you can actually hear someone talking to you even when that's not really happening. That's a really common example. Other people may have certain kinds of stresses that happen at school. So somebody might be sitting in class and worry that their professor is kind of trying to give them a message by the way in which they're arranging the chairs in the room, or certain phrases or mannerisms the professor's saying that may make them worry that maybe that professor knows something about them or is judging them or trying to give them a hard time. But at the same time, they might think, well, maybe that's just in my imagination and it's not really happening. Or somebody might be finding that when they're on the subway, that they're noticing certain people looking at them and wondering if maybe someone could somehow know what they were thinking about, even without them actually saying it. And then at the same time wonder, no, that's probably not possible.
So it seems like there's many different type of scenarios where you might consider someone at risk for psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
But I was wondering if there were any maybe telltale signs that someone's likely to under risk for psychosis, or are there any signs or symptoms that are like well known across the community? Or
Well, I mean, bottom line is if you or somebody that you know is experiencing some changes, one of the most important things is just, like if you had a friend or, is again knowing that there are resources for getting more information. The Cedar Clinic, for example, has a website that has a list of some common signs and symptoms that might include things like just feeling like your mind is playing tricks on you, being more suspicious or uneasy with other people, feeling overwhelmed with being around other people. Sometimes people find it overwhelming or hard to keep up with kind of taking showers and keeping clean and dressing well. Sometimes people will feel like their eyes or their ears are playing tricks on them. But there's no one kind of symptom that everybody experiences. And if you have these symptoms, it doesn't mean you're at risk for psychosis. There's a lot of different reasons some of these changes can be happening. And really, I think the most helpful thing is connecting with a trusted adult or friend that can kind of help you get support for what you need.
I guess some of the cases you were talking about, that practical experiences you've had with clients seem like they could be very distressing to an individual, and kind of what role can Cedar play in helping those individuals and providing services and referrals?
Yeah, so the Cedar Clinic, really one of our goals is to help people that are experiencing these kinds of symptoms to be able to know about us and to connect with us or to connect with treatment providers that can be helpful. And for that reason, we often go to colleges and counseling centers and high schools and private practitioners to kind of tell them about the services that we offer. And there's different ways of connecting with the Cedar Clinic. We have a phone number and a website, www.cedarclinic, C-E-D-A-R, clinic, clinic.org. And people call us and talk about their concerns, and we have a clinician that kind of helps to get a better sense of what's going on and whether coming in to our clinic for an evaluation might be helpful. To kind of, there's so many different reasons why changes can happen, and so sometimes the first step is just talking to a counselor, but coming right to Cedar is also not the only way. A lot of times, even if you're, on a college campus, for example, the counseling center is a really wonderful resource. Pretty much every college has a counseling center, and often the counseling centers are getting better and better at trying to reach out to young adults so that they know who to call when they're feeling overwhelmed and when they're needing some help. So counseling centers are great. There are even things like talk and text lines. So in the Massachusetts area, there's a wonderful kind of text message service as well as a call line that's, I think, run through, I think it might be UNICEF, which is called Call to Text. One possibility for someone who just feels too overwhelmed by the idea of talking with a friend or a counseling center or their resident advisor or parent can even just reach out to the text number is 741, and you can send a text message to a clinician. There's someone available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and just describe what's happening, and they can help you think through some options for getting some more support.
Awesome. So it seems like there's a lot of resources available for people who are undergoing these new changes. So, as we go back to the topic of stress, I was just wondering, so for certain people, they're more vulnerable to having symptoms caused by stress. And so it seems to me like the best option would be early intervention or kind of preventing people from experiencing stress as badly as they are. Or is there any way of coping with stress, or what should someone do?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Early intervention, we know that there's more and more research happening that lets us know that early intervention is really key, especially for people that are experiencing signs of mental illness, signs of possible risk for psychosis, that the earlier that somebody does get connected with care, the more likely they are to get back on track. These symptoms are really treatable. So there are a variety of therapies, there are a variety of different kinds of supports that people can experience. There are also medications that can be helpful for helping people get back on track when they experience symptoms. And one of the things that is kind of most detrimental for young people who are experiencing signs of early psychosis is when they wait for a really long time and the symptoms get worse and the stress gets bigger. So if somebody is experiencing some trouble in a class in school, for example, and they start to worry that their professor is trying to give them a hard time or knows what they're thinking, and they continue just worrying about it on their own, they might start to, skip the class altogether. They might maybe just start spending a lot of time in their dorm room. Maybe they stop seeing their friends. And then they're kind of out of touch with the people that could be supportive and helpful to them. And our hope is to reach out to young adults and teens that are first experiencing these signs, to kind of let them know that there's help for this. And when someone connects with help, there are a variety of things that could make a huge difference. So some of the young people I've worked with, even just learning about what their symptoms are, even just learning about, that it's possible for your brain to hear noises that, and have your mind play tricks on you, can be helpful. And people sometimes learn strategies to kind of have those not get in their way so much. For some people, a change in school environment can make a huge difference. So being able to get some extra tutoring to manage some stress related to a class, or even making sure that their schedule fits in so that they get enough sleep, can make a huge difference for people. And then some other people that we've worked with have really benefited from some medicines that can help to change the way that the brain relates to some of these stressors.
So you talked a little bit about how stress can increase an individual's risk for mental illness or psychosis in general. I was curious a bit about how stress from the symptoms being experienced can exacerbate the experience of the illness and make it maybe more distressing.
Absolutely. So it's definitely a cycle, right? So a lot of the young people that we see may, first experience their mind playing tricks on them in the midst of a difficult situation, like maybe an argument with a family member, and then they may experience their mind playing tricks on them, and that causes further stress. So, they might have an argument with a family member and then hear a voice that might say something. Sometimes it's very common for the voices to say something that sounds kind of mean, like, you're a bad person, or even you deserve to die, is not an uncommon thing. And then there's the stress that relates to that experience. Oh my goodness, what just happened to me? Like, why am I hearing that? Am I losing my mind? What does this mean? And then there's the stress of trying to understand and worry about yourself. And that's very, very common. We see, I'd say earlier Eddie asked about if there's kind of one common thing that almost everybody experiences. And The people that come into the Cedar Clinic are very different, but one thing almost everybody's worried about is that they're losing their mind, that people are going to tell them that they're crazy, that they're going to be judged. That's a really common worry.
So, as you were saying, so is stigma a big preventative measure for people coming in to receive help?
I think worries about being stigmatized, being judged, and that they're going to find out that if they tell somebody about what's going on, they're going to think that it's really, really bad and they're not going to be able to do the things they care about. I think that can get in the way of people getting help. That's one of the reasons why I like to try to help people know how common these experiences are, and just because you're feeling like your mind is playing tricks on you does not at all mean that you are inevitably going to develop a serious mental illness or be unable to do things that you have plans for in the future. These are treatable experiences, but you can't get the treatment unless you're able to find someone that you trust to talk to about it.
So, for this podcast, we also like to talk about the brain and innovative therapies. So I was wondering if there were any innovative therapies or stress reduction methods that people can use to help reduce stress that they're experiencing.
Sure. There are a variety of different kinds of therapy for stress, and there's more and more things that are available for young adults to access as well. Your counseling center will probably have a variety of things on their website that you can check out as well. But, in terms of stress, one of the, sort of general things that I think is really important for all young adults to think about, as well as older adults like myself, is just generally taking care of yourself and kind of making time for the kind of basic needs that people have. So getting enough rest, getting good and healthy food, getting the right amount of exercise, having meaningful life activities that you enjoy, both fun and productivity in your life, and balance of those things as well. A couple of different stress reducers that many people that I work with, as well as myself, make use of is exercise. There's also strategies like mindfulness therapies that involve ways of being able to kind of learn to kind of focus on the present moment and kind of let go of some worries and about the future or rumination about the past. There are a variety of apps that can kind of help practice mindfulness at home. Yoga, and other kinds of exercise can kind of teach some of those strategies as well. There are therapies such as cognitive behavioral therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy that are great treatments to kind of help people who are experiencing a variety of different kinds of stressors, as well as mental health difficulties like depression or anxiety or even psychosis.
So on last week's episode, Dr. Keshvan was kind of speaking about how people at risk might have some cognitive difficulties and how cognitive remediation might be useful for them. So I was wondering if cognitive remediation might, in fact, decrease stress, because it might help address the fact that people are having difficulties.
I think that's a great connection. A lot of times, a lot of the folks who come into our clinic, one of the stressors they're experiencing is that they aren't feeling like they can think as clearly as they used to. Sometimes experiencing trouble with memory or paying attention or even just being able to get started on activities and get things done. And cognitive remediation, which are a variety of different kinds of treatments that are aimed to kind of improve thinking, improve attention, memory, processing speed, organization, those treatments can have a positive effect, especially if they help that person do things that are meaningful to them. So somebody who's a student who really cares about being a student, anything that's going to help them to perform better in school and meet their goals is likely to have a positive impact on stress as well.
So are any of these therapies used at Cedar Clinic? Or
we offer pretty much all of these at the Cedar Clinic. We have individual therapy. We provide cognitive behavioral therapy as well as acceptance and commitment therapy. We also, a lot of the therapies that we offer within the Cedar Clinic involve just helping manage stress in different ways. So a lot of times folks who come into our clinic will get help with figuring out what kinds of school accommodations they need, help with talking with their families and helping their families learn how to be helpful to them. And we also have a treatment that we're studying which does use cognitive remediation to help people learn about some strategies to help them perform better in school and work and also in social situations.
Oh, so is that the CLUE study that you were talking about?
That's the CLUE study, yeah.
While we were introducing you, we were reading that you were interested in developing the CLUE study.
Uh-huh.
So we were wondering if you could maybe describe that a bit more, because we weren't very sure what it was.
Absolutely. CLUE stands for Cognition for Learning and for Understanding Everyday Social Situations. And that's a program that we are that's a study at the Cedar Clinic and the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, where we have developed a program that's based on another program called Cognitive Enhancement Therapy, and we've adapted it for young people between the ages of 15 and 30 who are experiencing some of these signs of risk for they're possibly having a risk for psychosis or their mind playing tricks on them. And that treatment involves a few different pieces. One piece is some cognitive exercises that a person does with a partner, and which actually practice almost like building your brain, almost like you might build your brain like a muscle. So practicing attention, memory, organization to improve those skills. They also, people who participate in CLUES get an individual counselor that helps them think about what's meaningful to them and what they want to get out of the program, what they're hoping to learn and improve in their lives. And there's also a group part where participants learn about and get to practice some different skills for improving their thinking and organization, as well as for acting wisely in social situations like school and work.
Awesome. So in our podcast, we like to summarize what our guests usually say. So I'm going to attempt to try to summarize what you were saying. So basically, stress is a really important factor that affects someone's physical and mental health, and that through personal self-care methods of exercising and eating correctly, people can reduce their amount of stress. But if it happens to be too much managed by oneself, then someone should reach out to a resource for help, or a clinic, or talk to their counselors, because there seems to be treatment available, and it seems to be plenty of resources for people undergoing difficult situations, right?
Yes, I'd agree, and I think I'd say that one of the best strategies for managing stress is to share that stress with someone else and to not be by yourself. That being able and willing to ask for help is one of the bravest things and most effective things that a young person can do to help manage stress.
Thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us, answering all our questions. We learned so much about the relationship between stress and mental illness, and more specifically, psychosis.
Yeah, we would have really liked to thank you for coming on to Braintalk today. So stay tuned, and thank you, everyone.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Braintalk. Thanks for listening.
For more information about helping young people at risk and for future episodes of Braintalk, please visit the Cedar Clinic website at www.cedarclinic.org.